Good morning. We are on the record. Welcome to the Maryland Public Service Commission. This is docket RM71. On October 29th of 2020, the Public Service Commission issued a notice in this docket proposing to adopt regulations regarding licensed professional engineer approval and stamping of natural gas infrastructure projects in Maryland. Today, I'm joined by my fellow commissioners, Commissioner Anthony O'Donnell, Commissioner Obie Linton, and Commissioner Mindy Herman. Commissioner Michael Richard is on official business and will not be participating in today's rulemaking. We have a number of parties that are participating today, so I'd like to take the appearances of those parties, beginning with commission staff.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. This is Michael Dean on behalf of the staff, and we also have John Clementson and John Borkowski for this hearing.
The Maryland Office of People's Counsel.
Good morning, Your Honor. Patrick Laughlin for Maryland OPC.
The United States National Transportation Safety Board.
Steve Blackstone with NTSB. Good morning.
Morning. The representative from the Baltimore Gas and Electric Company.
Good morning, Chairman Stanek and Commissioner.
Ms. Sikora, we may want to try that again. If you could turn your video off, we had some interference.
Sure. Beverly Sikora on behalf of BGE. I also have Robert Geis with me today.
Thank you, Ms. Sikora. That was much more clear. Columbia Gas of Maryland.
Good morning, Chairman Stanek and Commissioners. Megan Moore on behalf of Columbia Gas, and I also have Ms. Cindy Sparks.
Thank you. Easton Utilities.
Good morning, Commissioner Jim Crowley on behalf of Eastern Utilities.
UGI Utilities.
Good morning, Commissioner. This is Michael Lyons of UGI Utilities.
Good morning. Washington Gas Light Company.
Good morning, Chairman Stanek, Commissioners. This is John Dodge appearing on behalf of WGL. I'm joined by my colleagues Kevin Murphy and Greg DeKramer this morning.
Good morning. Are there any other parties that wish to make an appearance? At this time, we will receive testimony and hear presentations from the various interested parties to this rulemaking session. We'll begin with a presentation by the Commission staff.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. John Borkowski for staff. I am waiting the presentation to be shown.
Thank you. I believe the host advisor is pulling it up right now.
Okay, great. There it is. Okay, I'd like to go to slide 2, Megan. Amanda, excuse me. Okay, regarding RM71, on September 13th, 2018, there was a series of explosions and fires which occurred after high-pressure natural gas was released into a low-pressure gas distribution system in the northeast region of the state of Massachusetts, and it damaged 131 structures in the cities of Lawrence, town Andover, and North Andover. One person was killed and at least 21 other individuals were transported to the hospital, and there were numerous other minor injuries. Now, following the investigation of this accident by the NTSB determined that improvements were needed in the engineering management of natural gas infrastructure work, and the NTSB developed the recommendations that required a licensed professional engineer, otherwise known as a PE, but a licensed professional engineer approval of natural gas infrastructure work, primarily because the requirements to obtain a PE license demonstrate minimum competencies such as earning a 4-year degree in engineering, passing different exams, and completing at least 4 years of progressive engineering experience under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer. Accordingly, NTSB Chairman Sumwalt sent a letter to Governor Hogan on October 24, 2019 that requested Maryland remove the exemption so that all future natural gas infrastructure projects require licensed PE approval and stamping. And I'll refer to this recommendation several times during my presentation this morning as P-19-16. Regarding the subject of today's rulemaking, a staff-led work group consisting of representatives from the gas utilities in Maryland who are involved in complex natural gas, along with the Office of People's Counsel and MEA, participated throughout 2020 on a proposal for regulations. Now, Maryland currently provides an exemption to PE licensing for natural gas infrastructure work through a provision in the Maryland Annotated Code Business Occupations and Professions article. The PE work group, otherwise known as the PEWG, deliberated over the first half of 2020, and we filed a report on July 2nd, 2020, which contained our initial recommendations to the Commission regarding the implementation of TSB recommendation P-1916. The work group felt that regulations were more appropriate than a statute change and recommended regulations for PE approval and stamping of complex work in Maryland. Subsequently, NTSB Board Chairman Sumwalt provided feedback on the board's recommendation to Governor Hogan on August 26, stating that, quote, we encourage you to include a catch-all condition with your definition of covered work, such as for any natural gas infrastructure project that might present a material risk to public safety. Chairman Sumwalt further stated that he believed that the recommendations proposed by the work group, if adopted with that addition, would satisfy the intent of safety recommendation P-19-16. So the work group met again several times to Chairman Sumwalt's feedback in an attempt to incorporate that feedback. And the result was that on October 27th, staff submitted a petition for rulemaking on behalf of the work group seeking to adopt regulations requiring licensed professional engineer approval and stamping of natural gas infrastructure projects in Maryland. And I would like to thank the Commission for docketing RM71 on October 29th in response to our petition for rulemaking. Amanda, next slide, please. Okay, this slide contains our proposed regulations in our petition for rulemaking, at least the start of the proposed regulations. We recommended the addition of a new COMAR chapter for work approval, which would be COMAR 20.55.10. And the scope of this new chapter is defined in Regulation .01A and B. Now, we did receive comments filed with the Commission on November 20th by BGE, where they made a proposal to move the date for compliance of this new work approval chapter to mid-2022. BGE indicated to staff and others in a subsequent work group meeting that COVID-19 and associated virtual work environments are having an impact on their ability to develop their work approval program, and also could eventually impact their ability to train their personnel. Now, we wanted to make sure that we get this right, and we discussed in the work group earlier this week, and there was consensus from some of the other utilities that they probably would need some more time too. With we had some support among the work group members for BG's position, and accordingly, we are now recommending that we move the compliance date to July 1st, 2022. There were also some other changes that we're recommending to the regulations versus what we filed in our petition for rulemaking, but these are more administrative type changes to properly incorporate by reference some specific documents. And on this slide, one of those documents that we would have to make a change to more properly incorporate would be the PHMSA Small System Operator Guidelines. So go to the next slide, I'll show you those changes. Amanda, you can go to the next slide, thank you. Okay, so here I have both red line and clean versions of the changes we're proposing to make that I described on the previous slide, except there's one other change in here where I'm changing the term operator to gas company, and I'd like to discuss that when we get to the slide I discuss definitions. But so you can see on this slide, we made the change to July 1st, and we've also made a change to more properly reference the PHMSA guidelines that we need to reference. Now, I'd like to just take 1 minute to discuss our recommendation, because I think this is critical to understand our recommendation to exclude small system operators from the regulation. The current PHMSA Operator Qualification Program, otherwise known as the OQ program, covers qualifications for field work, and they have guidelines for determining, what is a small system operator as opposed to larger gas utilities. And the primary reason they did this is to reduce the regulatory burden on these smaller companies who have less risky work. So typically these small system operators only have a small number of employees, usually less than 5. And these small system operators might be propane system operators, landfill gas operators, master meter operators, of which we have a number in Maryland. But in the end, the PHMSA guidelines allow the state program manager, who for Maryland is John Clementson, to have the authority to make the determination of a company as a small system operator based on the PHMSA guidelines and any other relevant factors. So the work group felt that we needed to have a similar inclusion for small system operators for what we're proposing is a work approval qualification, as we have for the OQ program, with one exception. We felt that if a small system operator has multiple pressure pipeline systems, such as what exists if that small company had a low pressure system, then they should be included in the regulation. We did not want to exclude any gas company that has a low pressure system from the regulations, since that was the impetus for the NTSB, or actually the impetus for the, why we're here today. So, so I just felt that was important to highlight in the scope, why we've included the small system operator references as an exclusion. So next slide. Okay, here we have a definitions slide, and we did determine that we need to have several definitions. Now, first off, BG noted in their November 20th comments that the term operator, as we use that in the regulation, is undefined. So again, in our work group meeting earlier this week, we agreed that we need to define the term operator because we use it several times in this proposed chapter. So looking at our existing regulations, we do have in COMAR the term gas company defined in COMAR chapter 57, and it has the same meaning as stated in the Public Utilities Article 1-101, which is the annotated code of Maryland. So we wanted to replace operator throughout with gas company in the proposed regulations. The other change information here from what was issued in our notice of proposed rulemaking is we determined also that use the term division later in this chapter. Now, division is defined in another COMAR chapter, but because it's in another COMAR chapter, it was determined by staff counsel that we should also add that definition into this chapter. So division means the engineering division of the Public Service Commission of Maryland as is defined elsewhere in COMAR. I'm not going to go into detail on the other definitions in this slide because I'm going to discuss them further as we talk more about the regulations. So I'm going to move on to slide 6. Thank you. Okay, on this slide, we discuss work approval requirements. Now, regarding work approvals, the core of our recommendation is a work approval framework that consists of two distinct bodies that define work. One is a covered project, which is in the definitions, and it is a natural gas infrastructure project that needs to be approved and stamped by a licensed professional engineer in Maryland. We also determine that the other distinct body of work is a non-covered project, which is natural gas infrastructure project work that can be approved by a licensed professional engineer or by a relevant qualified person possessing the necessary knowledge, experience, and skills regarding natural gas distribution system. So we have these two distinct bodies of work. One is to deal with more complex, risky type work, and the non-covered project would be targeted at less risky, more routine type work, such as service connections, etc. So furthermore, these work approval requirements would include training, qualification, requalification requirements that need to be documented in a gas company's operation and maintenance procedures. And the NTSB filed comments on November 23rd that concluded that a PE seal should be required on all public utility engineering plans to reduce the likelihood of accidents such as the Merrimack Valley accident occurring. And we urge the Public Service Commission to adopt a strong regulation that implements the NTSB recommendations. The work group does feel that our proposal meets the spirit of the NTSB recommendation in that we attempted to develop a bright line definition for all types of natural gas infrastructure work that could potentially present material risk of high consequence to public safety and therefore would require PE approval as a covered project, while we would still allow relevant qualified personnel to approve less risky work. So next slide, Amanda. Okay, so this slide is the regulation proposal listing the types of work that the work group feels should be included in a bright line definition for work that should be licensed PE. At least the first 8 items on this list are bright line definitions for the types of work that would be covered projects. Now, I'm not going to go into all these types of work unless there are questions. However, I would like to draw your attention to the proposed regulation D9 at the bottom of this list, which the work group specifically based on NTSB Board Chairman Sunwald's feedback on August 26th, that we encourage you to include a catch-all condition within your definition of covered work. So this is what we worked on as a group. And, we believe that the recommendation and this edition of Regulation D9, if adopted, will satisfy the intent of NTSB Safety Recommendation P-19-16. Next slide. Thank you. And this slide rounds out the work group's regulation proposal stating that relevant qualified personnel can approve non-covered projects. And we also felt that there should be a temporary exemption for emergency approval of a covered project that would be followed up by PE approval as soon as practical. And we also felt in certain situations waivers may be necessary and therefore recommended this waiver approval be delegated to the PSC engineering division, similar to the enforcement authority, the existing enforcement authority of the commission delegated to the engineering division. Final slide, please. Okay, so in summary, our work group concludes that the implementation of the NTSB recommendation P-19-16 should be pursued to require PE approval and stamping for natural gas infrastructure design projects in Maryland, while also following the approach taken in the PHMSA Pipes Act that qualified personnel can be used under certain situations. We also determined that our work qualification or WQ program should be adopted by gas companies under the scope of this regulation to implement a suitable work approval framework. And to ensure compliance, the commission staff would periodically audit an operator's WQ program. And to that end, the PSC engineering division will need to develop a standard enforcement guidance checklist to train our pipeline safety engineers on this enforcement guidance. We did not recommend moving the exemption from since many types of work from various engineering disciplines are exempted from the licensed PE approval in the business and occupations mentioned earlier. But also mainly due to the fact that safety of natural gas infrastructure is a statutory duty of the commission. So we felt that Maryland could still accomplish the same objective as an exemption, but without the statute change using a regulation change. With that, I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief Borkowski, and thank you to all the members of the work group. Obviously, safety is of paramount importance, and we've learned some lessons since the Merrimack Valley incident 2 years back. Commissioners, questions for Mr. Borkowski before we hear other presentations and testimony. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Borkowski.
Morning.
Chief, I wanted to ask you about your comments about extending for 6 months, and I think you mentioned something related to COVID. Can you expand on that for me a little bit so I understand what we're talking about here?
Okay. Basically, BG and other companies are in a virtual work environment, and actually, I understood that from the BG discussion the other day with the work group that's been extended for much of, or it's anticipated to be extended for much of 2021. We also discussed the fact that it's probably going to take another 5 or 6 months to finalize these regulations. Now, although the companies are starting to work now in anticipation of a regulation, it's only a year and a half away, and it would be a year away from when we, the regulations are actually effective. But COVID-19 is impacting the ability to develop the program, but also I think you have to train these people who are approving work packages. And it presumably could also impact the ability to train. So it's just slowing things down a little bit, and that's why BG requested the extra 6 months, and some of the other companies supported that they're having the same challenges.
But I guess the work is still going on in the field, right?
Right, but this is developing, a work approval framework.
I understand that, but even though the regs aren't going to be fully implemented, they could be making preparations to train their people and get ready to do this. In my view, look, this is safety here. We want to keep the aspirational aspect of these regulations to keep the accelerator on, not to delay it. There's another way to approach this should these delays materialize. And that other way would be to keep the date as originally proposed by everybody, except that BGD asked for 6 more months. And there was some more discussion this week, and it sounded like everybody decided we're not going to fight you on that, to me. But another way to approach it would be start the implementation, go through the regulatory process, and if at the end you're not quite ready, come back in and justify why and tell us that you need a little more time, and we would have the authority to waive that implementation, effectively granting an extension. And I like that approach better because it kind of keeps the incentive on to get ready to do this, because the work is safety related. It's in the field and it's going on, and we need to be about this, not approach it like because we might need more time. What do you say? What do you think about that?
I don't have any additional comments over what I previously made, but I would open it up maybe for BG or one of the other utilities to maybe give their perspective.
Why don't we wait? If they're going to make presentations, or I'll wait and I'll just hold that. I thought that engineering may have an opinion about that, but we'll get to the other parties, I suspect, Mr. Chairman, as we proceed.
Thank you. I understand that the National Transportation Safety Board would like to make some remarks or testimony. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. This is Steve Blackstone with National Transportation Safety Board. And thank you for the opportunity to make some remarks regarding today's rulemaking proposal. We very much appreciate the Commission's undertaking this rulemaking in response to our recommendation. NTSB is an independent federal agency that's charged by Congress with investigating significant accidents in all modes of transportation: aviation, railroad, highway, marine, and pipeline. We determine the probable cause of accidents we investigate, and we issue safety recommendations aimed at preventing those accidents, such as we're discussing today. As staff described, this recommendation resulted from our investigation of the overpressurization of the natural gas distribution system in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts in September of 2018. The written statement that we provided gives you additional details about NTSB's investigation. We also have a more comprehensive report available if the Commission would like to see that. During our investigation, we identified a number of omissions in the engineering work package and construction documentation for the project that was undergoing. And although the operator in Merrimack, Columbia Gas, used its project workflow process to develop and review and approve the engineering plans, the work package did not include consideration of the existence of regulator sensing lines within the scope of work. In particular, the regulator sensing lines connected to the distribution system that were slated to be abandoned. While the engineering design package for the project did undergo a constructability review, what we found was that the review didn't identify the impact on the pressure regulation and control. We believe that a comprehensive constructability review with the seal of approval from a professional engineer would likely have identified that omission and thereby prevented the accident from occurring. Professional engineering approval for drawings is a required practice for engineering projects throughout the United States for roadways, bridges, tunnels, dams, building constructions. However, 31 states exempt public utilities from this requirement, including Maryland. In many cases, this exemption creates a loophole because there's no requirement to have the work reviewed by any engineer at all. PE licensees are personally accountable for the work that they approve, and they must exercise responsibility over all aspects of the work. And they're bound to a code of ethics that creates a duty to hold public safety, health, and welfare paramount. we concluded that requiring a professional engineer to stamp plans would illustrate that the plans have been approved by an accredited professional with the appropriate skills and knowledge and expertise to provide a comprehensive review. As staff noted, we recommended that Maryland and the other states without this requirement remove the exemption so that all future natural gas infrastructure projects would require a licensed professional engineer approval and stamping. Natural gas infrastructure continues to be one of the safest and most efficient means of transporting fuel to homes and businesses. However, as we've seen, the consequences can be tragic when there's insufficient planning and safety oversight. Thus, we urge the Public Safety Commission to adopt a strong regulation that implements NTSB's recommendations. Certainly, you've made a very strong step in that direction with this proposal today. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for your testimony today. Before I inquire if the commissioners have questions, I am not aware of any other party wishing to make a formal presentation or testimony, but if any party wishes to do so, now is the time. Okay, we'll go back to Commissioner O'Donnell's question. Were there any other utilities that wish to respond to the commissioner?
Good morning, Commissioners. Beverly Socorro. We definitely been working on
Ms. Socorro, we can't hear you, but if you turn off your video, that helped before.
Okay, sorry about that. I was saying BG has definitely been working towards, implementing these regulations. We have certainly gotten much better at working remotely through the pandemic. Where I think we're especially running into issues is, we're either going to have to get existing engineers on our system to become PEs, which is not a easy or quick process, or we're going to need to hire engineers who either have the relevant experience or who we then have to train to get the relevant engineering experience so that they can be able to certify under the particular, of the jobs. You can't take any PE who doesn't necessarily have gas experience and bring them on and ask them right away to start certifying. Part of the code of PEs is to be able to understand what they're doing before they can. And there's not many engineers out there. And, we've been trying to hire engineering employees in other situations, and it's not an easy process because there's not a lot out there. And I think that's where we're really facing some concern with we can have all the processes and everything in place, but if we don't have PEs, we're not going to be able to comply.
And Ms. Shakura, you think 6 months will allow you to find these engineers and get into compliance? That makes all the difference. 6 months.
I don't know that it will, but I think it gave us a little more comfort that we would be able to.
Right.
Part of the issue has been in addition to there not being a lot of engineers out there, the pandemic has kind of made hiring a little more difficult. People.
Let me question you on that, because I thought you might say that. We've done some hiring during the pandemic at the commission, and we found just the opposite. Highly qualified professionals, plentiful, applying for these jobs because of the economy and the availability of highly qualified people. So I'm finding something different in my experience, that there aren't people to hire out there. It's not like employment is at all-time record highs right now like it was pre-pandemic. It's very different right now.
I can't speak to the type of employees that you're, hiring at the commission. Looking at engineers, we have had challenges.
So has BG&E actually done an inventory of their onboarded professional engineering staff, your engineers? Because I know you got a lot of engineers.
We have lots of engineers. We have very few PEs.
How many?
I believe in gas we have 2 or 3.
Bev, I can speak to that.
Okay.
Yes, in gas distribution, BGE has, our inventory shows that we have 4 individuals in the division that have a professional engineering license. 2 of those are in key manager roles and are not actively practicing engineering. And both of those are actually licensed in other states. The remaining 2, one of which is myself, are licensed in Maryland.
And how many do you need to do this, to implement this?
Well, that's still part of the challenge as we work through this. We do have the ability to outsource a significant number of our programmatic design work, but there is still a significant portion of work that's going to be performed by company crews, specifically emergency work that'll need to be approved by a PE after completion of work. And we also have a significant amount of projects that are designed internally. So just going off of the, staying in bounds of the ethics that govern professional engineer stamps, a work that is designed by a firm, whether it be a gas operator or a contract firm, needs to be stamped by an engineer who is employed by that firm. So any BGE design will need to be stamped by a BGE professional engineer.
So you can't get a professional engineering firm that's licensed to do professional engineering gas work in Maryland and contract with them to provide that service? They actually have to be an employee of the company?
If the work is designed by BGE or if it is emergency work performed by BGE without a design.
I'd like to see where it says that, because I think
yes,
these
sir,
small,
we
these
did
small,
consider that.
Hang on. I think these small companies contract this type of work out to professional engineering companies all the time, even if they're small utilities.
Your Honor, I think the difference is if we design the work, we can't then give that to an engineering firm to approve. If BGE employees design, we have to have a PE at BGE. If the engineering firm does the design, their people can approve. So I think what we're trying to say is that to the extent that we have, BGE is not going to outsource all of its design work. We do have a certain amount that stays inside, and if we stay inside, we have to have the PEs on staff to approve those. We can't.
Right.
You can't outsource the approval process.
Yeah, but I'm not asking that. Excuse me for the feedback. I'm asking, you can't contract somebody to come on board. You have contractors working in your company all the time, all over the place, including professionals, and they're incorporated into the design team. I don't know where the distinction says that they have to be on the payroll with an employee number from BG&E. That doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't even work that way in the nuclear world.
I can't speak to that. We'd have to look at that, but typically we don't bring in contractors just to do the approval work. We're either outsourcing the entire package or we're keeping it all in. So we'd have to look into that further.
So you heard me ask Mr. Borkowski, Ms. Sakura, about the potential to go with the original date, and should you have problems, come back to the commission in detail, because you'll know specifically what the delays are at that point. It won't be speculation as to what may or may not happen or what may or may not be available. And if you have problems, come back in and say, look, we weren't able to hire, we weren't able to do it, we're not able to implement, and we need a little more time. We need another 6 months. That way we're keeping the general pressure on to implement at an appropriate level, because this is safety. We're trying to balance your needs, not just your needs and wants, but the safety of the public. And that's what we have to keep in mind here. And that's, you've heard me proceeding after proceeding talking about these low pressure systems because they keep, it's something that keeps me up at night. And
Your Honor, BGE fully supports, safety is absolutely a #1 priority at BGE. We take it very seriously. And certainly what you proposed is another option. I think we are trying to avoid, we felt comfortable that the extra 6 months would, give us more time and so that we would avoid having to come back to you. But again, if the commission is more comfortable with keeping the original date and having to have us, probably come back, then we can certainly do that.
I would think coming back at an AM would be a relatively easy process if you needed more time. But this way we keep the accelerator on to kind of keep the aspirational goal out there to get this done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Corr.
Thank you, Commissioner. And as I believe Chief Borkowski mentioned a few minutes ago, there's an exemption process in place. So I don't see it would be entirely burdensome for the utility to come back in close to 12 months and make that showing to request an additional 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, based on the utility's experience in either training or securing additional professional engineers. Do other commissioners have any questions for any of the parties? Seeing Commissioner Linton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question along the lines of what O'Donnell asked a few moments ago, and I suppose it would go to the utility companies. A couple of days ago, the commission approved the STRIDE plans for 3 of our gas companies that are, I think I've heard them all make appearances this morning. And I'm curious as to whether or not the companies took into consideration these new regulations when they were putting together their projections for the STRIDE projects. And are they prepared to maintain the projections that were just approved in light of the adoption of these regulations? So I would ask that to the utility companies, what your status is, and are we going to hear from you in the future that you can't make your projections because of these regulations? That's what I'm hoping we don't hear. So I'd like to hear from you.
Your Honor, I'm happy to go first, even though I think we are in the middle or last of the STRIDE presentations. This is John Dodge again on behalf of Washington Gas. The short answer is that we did incorporate new regulations into our STRIDE planning, Commissioner Linton. I would turn it over to my colleague, Mr. DeCramer, to explain exactly why that is, and perhaps he or his colleague, Mr. Murphy, can also address Commissioner O'Donnell's question on timing. I think there's a distinction between what is called covered and uncovered work, but I'll let the expert speak to that, starting with Mr. DeCramer.
Good morning, Commissioners. Greg DeCramer on behalf of Washington Gas. I have my video turned on. I hope I'm not breaking up. I'm just looking for confirmation that you guys can hear me okay. Thank you. Okay. In regard to what Mr. Dodge just relayed, I think we have a slightly different business model wherein the vast majority of our work is contracted out. And we've been working with our contract resources, shared with them what's been developed by the working group with the understanding that is going to be implemented, likely to be implemented, or some version of that in short order. So I feel as though we are well along the path of being able to comply with what is being discussed here today, certainly by the timeline that's in the current regulations, and in all likelihood, the original timeline as well, if not before. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have in regards to that, but suffice it to say that we have discussions with our contract resources and have started to develop contract terms and processes that will allow us to comply with the regulations as being discussed today.
I appreciate that. I'm I'm assuming we just heard a little bit from BGE. The representative from Columbia, I believe that's Ms. Moore.
Yes. Good morning, Commissioner Linton. Whoops, I'm going to put my video on. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. We do not anticipate any issues with our 2021 plans with regard to these PE regs. We did consider them. I do want to mention, as you all know, we have began our journey with PE stamp approval perhaps a bit earlier than others for some obvious reasons. So we have been on this journey for a while now, implementing these work processes and procedures in our NiSource footprint. I do want to see if Ms. Sparks has anything to add, as she's a PE and one of our design engineering leaders. So Cindy, I'll turn it over to you if you have anything else to add.
Thanks, Megan. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you, Cindy.
Okay, great. Great. We're doing virtual school here, so it's a little loud. I apologize. We've already started our journey meeting these requirements, and we are at full staff for Maryland. It took about a year for us to get staffed up and to find a qualified person for our footprint. I'd like to add that there are not a lot of qualified natural gas engineers out there with the relevant experience. So it's taken us a little while to get our feet under us, but it's definitely possible. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sparks and Mr. Moore, Ms. Moore, excuse me, and Mr. Kramer. I have one other question for Mr. Borkowski regarding the waiver authority that was mentioned, where the authority would vest in the engineering division. Was that authority that you were referencing envisioned only to work for emergency situations, or was that for any waiver request of these proposed regulations?
It's John Borkowski. Thank you for that question, Commissioner Linton. This is for the waiver authority. The way we codified it was applicable to any work in that particular chapter. So, that would also, as Chairman Stanek pointed out earlier, apply, for instance, if BGE needed a waiver because it was having difficulty implementing its program one time, that authority would be similarly delegated to the engineering division. I want to remind commissioners and the chairman that with regard to gas safety type work, we already have a lot of authority delegated with regards to compliance with safety regulations from the commission. This would simply be an extension of that, so that the reinforcing the trust that the commission has previously given to the engineering division. And that's
all right.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Borkowski. That's the only questions I had. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, everybody, for the answers.
I'd like to thank all the parties to the work group and the participants today. I'm prepared to make a motion that would incorporate a January 1st, 2022 effective date, but move to adopt all of the other consensus positions that were filed just yesterday on December 3rd, 2020. So at this point, I will move for the commission to publish the proposed regulations filed by the commission staff in this docket on October 27th, 2020, as amended yesterday on December 3rd, 2020, and as further amended here today to reflect a January 1st, 2022 effective date in the Maryland Register for notice and comment subject to non-substantive changes necessary to conform to the Code of Maryland Regulations drafting requirements. And the following regulations would be affected as follows. Revisions to existing regulations in Title 20, Subtitle 55, Chapter 10, Regulations 1, 2, and 3. The vote begins with Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. The motion is approved. Thank you again to all the work group members for getting us to where we are today. With that, this hearing is adjourned. We're off the record.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.